This is Soliloquy Radio, the podcast that discusses philosophy, spirituality, consciousness, and paths to a positive lifestyle from a non-theistic perspective. So sit back and open your mind. All right, welcome back to Soliloquy Radio. This is episode 4, clearing up misconceptions about a positive lifestyle. And that's what we're doing on this episode. This is episode 4, and I suggest that you listen to these first 4 episodes as they will form a foundation for the rest of the podcast. And later on, you can go skip around different episodes as you see fit. But these 4 first episodes kind of form a foundation so that we're all on the same understanding. Talking about understanding, we're going to talk about the misunderstanding or misconceptions about what it is to live a positive or enlightened or enriched life. And it's very important for us to clear up these misconceptions because there's an old parable that says that if you grab the snake by the wrong end, it's going to bite you and another person. And so in order for neither of us to get bit, we're going to lay down some understanding about what it is to live this type of lifestyle. We're going to get with some of the misconceptions. Being positive or enriched or enlightened or whatever you want to call it, whatever school of knowledge or understanding that you're going through, it isn't going to change what happens in your life. It's going to change your perception of life, but it is not going to change the world around you, meaning that things will still be what they are. Your rent will still be due. The neighbor's kid will still bounce his ball on the wall. You're still going to get on a train and it's still going to be packed with sweaty people. You're going to drive in traffic and nobody's going to use their blinkers. This is all still going to occur. Day-to-day life will still occur. It's not going to miraculously change all of that where all of a sudden everything goes your way. Also, living this life doesn't mean that all of a sudden you become an optimist. And it's actually almost the opposite of that. Because we're not going to walk through this life in a huge optimist view because that sets us up for dissatisfaction. Because at that point, we're starting to expect life to be other than what it is if we're constantly going around trying to be pessimistic about certain situations. Another thing it's not is that it's not going to change your toxic relationship. It's not going to change the person that you may be in a relationship with that's toxic towards you and the relationship that you're in. It's not going to make that better. We're going to get into that in a whole separate podcast because that deserves a whole episode on itself. It's not going to change your boss or the co-worker who plays his radio too loud. None of that is going to change. It's not going to make the sandwich that you get for lunch all of a sudden taste better. So I wanted to just get a couple of things out there about what it isn't, because I want these misconceptions to not be whirling around our brains as we're trying to better our lives. So you say to yourself, well, what's the point if it's not going to change anything? And you know, what is the point of doing all of this? Is that living this way changes your perception, changes your outlook, changes the way you see things. That is the whole point of this, to see things for what they are, to see the wizard behind the curtain. No longer do we see the wizard as something that's miraculous and all of a sudden full of awe and spectacle. No, we see the wizard for what it is. And when we see the wizard for what it is, we're not fooled by the wizard by going on some wild conquest that he sends us on. The whole point of this is that you see life for what it is. And when you see life for what it is, it allows you to accept life for what it is. And there's certain things in life that are just always there. And I'm sure everybody's heard the saying, the only thing that's for sure is death and taxes. And that is so much truth to that statement, because there are things in life that are certain no matter what. Those things are death, sickness, old age, those and taxes. You can in certain countries, this one, but you can say for sure, no matter on what part of this earth that you live on, and no matter if you lived on the moon or another planet, those three things for our species always exist. And not only for our species, but they're all life here. Even the sun. The sun has a life expectancy. Our solar system has a life expectancy. When that sun reaches the end of its life, our yellow sun, and goes out in either a supernova or what have you at the end of its life, this solar system is done. And the universe itself also has a life expectancy. We may not know what that is yet because of the restraints that we have with physics and finding all that out. But at a certain point in time, this entire universe will end. All life as we know it. Everything. There is nothing that lives forever. And so the sooner we become accepting to that concept is the sooner we start to accept life for what it is. And we have to be okay with it. We can't just accept it and say, and fight it. We have to be okay with it and accept it and move on. And that is a huge part of all of this, is to see it for what it is, accept it, and move on. If you can change it, do so and move on. If you can't change it, accept it and move on. That is the way you're going to see the least amount of resistance in your life. And the least amount of resistance causes the least amount of dissatisfaction and suffering in your life, because you're not expecting things to be a certain way. And that's what, in a nutshell, is what it is to walk around enriched, enlightened, awoke, positive, whatever term you want to use. It's not about always being happy and always being, as I discussed before, happiness is a feeling. It is fleeting. It comes, it goes. But we can find joy, which is different, and we can be content, which is different. We're going to get into that joy and content in another episode. I want to give to you guys a simple sentence that kind of sums this all up. And it's: a positive life allows you to accept life as it is so that you experience it with less dissatisfaction, and in turn be able to perceive life in a better light and be able to reflect that outwards to provoke a change amongst your peers. I want you to think about that for a second. Now I'm going to read this again so that you can hear it. And I'm going to read it a little slower. It is: a positive life allows you to accept life as it is so that you experience it with less dissatisfaction, and in turn be able to perceive life in a better light and be able to reflect that outwards to provoke a change amongst your peers. So we're going to take a little break, as we always do. I want you to think about that sentence, and when we get back, we're going to dive right into it and dissect it. You're listening to Soliloquy Radio. You can find this show on any major podcast provider by going to soliloquyradio.com. under the Listen Now tab and clicking on your preferred provider link. You can also find links to the YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram page. While you're there, remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And now, back to the show. All right, we're back. And like I said, we're going to dissect this last sentence that I said. And I'm going to read it one more time. And it's: a positive life allows you to accept life as it is so that you experience it with less dissatisfaction and in turn be able to perceive life in a better light and be able to reflect that outwards to provoke a change amongst your peers. So we were already talking about accepting life as it is. That is a huge concept sometimes for us, to accept life as it is. And I'm gonna give you a quick example, and this kind of makes it easier for some of us to understand, but you can put this to any part of your life. And so when I get up to go to work in the morning, I have about a 10-minute commute, 10-15 minutes. Now, if I leave my house at a certain time, that commute will be 10 to 15 minutes. If I leave my house 5 minutes after said time, my commute literally doubles. My commute will be half hour because of the traffic. Now, if I leave early, I beat the traffic, that's fine. But it's that part about accepting life as it is. That is a plain fact. If I leave my house at a certain time, no traffic, 5 minutes later, doubles my commute. Now, we have to learn to accept that. I've learned to accept that. The dissatisfaction in our lives and the suffering that we endure comes from when we know that fact to be true, yet we wish for it to be different. If I were to leave my house 5 minutes later, and the whole time I am expecting that traffic to not be there, then in turn I'm going to get frustrated. And it's going to set my tone for the rest of the day. I'm going to get frustrated with the traffic. I'm going to get frustrated with the person who cut me off. Then the person who's not using their signal lights. And then so on and so on in the cart. And it starts building and building and building and building and building. Because I'm not stopping the reactivity to it. So if something happens to me and I end up leaving 5 minutes late, then it is what it is. And that is a profound statement that we say it all the time, right? It is what it is. But sometimes it's hard for us to really understand that concept and really apply it to our lives. It is what it is because it is what it is. All right? That traffic will be there. People around you are going to get sick and die. It is what it is. It doesn't mean that you do not feel emotions associated with it. That's not what this means. We are humans. We are emotional animals. What it means is that we don't continue the reactivity to it. So I leave 5 minutes late and I'm in traffic. But I already know and accept that there will be traffic. And I know my commute will be longer. So I accept it and I go and I move on. It's when we start fighting that. There's a concept about the 2 arrows. And the concept goes where you're walking in the woods and all of a sudden you get struck by an arrow. And you couldn't do anything about that first arrow. That first arrow just happened. But then you're standing there and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got an arrow in me. Well, why me? Why of all people? Why is this happening to me? Then the second arrow comes, which is you sitting there reacting to it. Like, why is it me? It's you because that's just life. It was going to be somebody. But it was you. And you're sitting there like, why is it me? Oh my gosh, everybody's going to think I'm so stupid for getting hit by an arrow. Boom, there's the third arrow. Why? Because you're sitting there now thinking that everybody else is going to think that you're stupid for getting hit by an arrow. And so you're just getting struck by arrows again and again and again because you're continuing the pattern of reactivity to the initial arrow. You got hit with an arrow, accept it. Move on. If you can do something about it, do it. If you can't, then move on. That is how we need to start living our lives. Because for the most part, we live in a world right now